Hello there. Welcome back to Engine25 Reviews. This is a show where we talk about movies and TV and nerd out about Star Wars is the topic this week. We come together a couple of times a month. I've got friends. I know some old friends in the movie business. And today we're just talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi because he's a pretty cool guy. So if you're a big old nerdy nerf herder like the rest of us, feel free to hit that subscribe button down below. And let's get on to the show, guys. We're here today with some old theater buddies, actually. It's my good buddy Adam, who's a pretty regular guest on the show, certainly anytime we're talking about Star Wars. And an old guy from my days on the stage, Chase. What's up, guys? How you doing? How you doing, Chase?
McClunky. I am just, processing this Obi-Wan Kenobi experience, internalizing all the lessons that we've learned from our wise old master, and excited to take them apart and see where that leaves us.
What about you, Adam? What's going on in your life?
Doing good. I'm glad to hear that we're talking about Star Wars. It means I dressed appropriately.
Yeah, I didn't.
Otherwise, good. Just finished moving, which is why I've got everything's a mess, and I've got big pieces of pink foam blocking the disgusting stacks of boxes behind me. I
have piles of boxes in my office too, but it's not because I'm moving; it's because I'm lazy. So that's another thing. And of course, my name is Brandon. I'm your host on Engine25 Reviews. You can see my social media there, and we're going to talk about Obi-Wan. So Obi-Wan is this old dude from this old movie where he finds this kid in the desert, and there's some spaceships. And then eventually they made some more movies where he wasn't so old. And this the Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Disney Plus show, follows up on those movies where he killed his best friend and threw him into a lava flow.
And he's medium old.
Yeah, he's.
Didn't know this was badly explained Star Wars in less than 3 minutes.
Oh, you know how we do around here. Yes. So, we've all been on the show before, and we've talked about how much we love Star Wars. But Obi-Wan has always been one of my favorites, particularly Ewan McGregor's version. Like everybody, you can't not love Alec Guinness. And he was had a pretty significant role in the first movie, obviously, and then he was a Force ghost briefly in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And his role is dramatically expanded in the prequels, obviously, played brilliantly by Ewan McGregor. And he happily came back to do a Disney Plus series, which was apparently at one point a movie, and then a different TV show, and then a movie, and now we're back to what we got. And I'm going to be the first to say, before you guys shit on my parade here, I really like this show. I was very happy with, especially considering we all had some mixed feelings on the Boba Fett show. There were things we liked and a lot that we weren't so thrilled about. And I came into this kind of cautiously optimistic because Ewan McGregor has always been fantastic in everything he does. And I've got to say, I'm pretty thrilled with how this turned out.
Did you watch The Island?
I like Ewan McGregor in The Island. That movie's not bad because of Ewan McGregor. It's bad because Michael Bay doesn't know how to make movies.
I'll give you that much, but okay. Anyway,
what about you, Chase? Tell your kind of general thoughts first. Where are we at after 6 episodes of Obi-Wan Kenobi?
This show set itself a very difficult target to hit. It has positioned itself between episode 3 and episode 4 and must not run afoul of the canons of those episodes and the movies surrounding them. Additionally,
cartoons now.
What's that?
Cartoons now. There's a lot of cartoon related things that this show kind of rubs up against.
That's right. Although I felt like this show, I was a little surprised, although a welcome one to be sure. But but it really didn't lean on much content outside of the movies. There were some references, but for the most part, it doesn't require you to have delved deep into the Filoni-verse.
That's right. The biggest thing is probably just the existence of the Inquisitors.
Sure.
Their presence here, and they were introduced in Rebels, and they've shown up kind of all over the place since then.
That's right. Although
but they're pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
They introduced them here.
They inquisit.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they kind of walk. The scene opens up and they're like, "Do you know who we are? We're the Inquisitors and we hunt Jedi." All right, now that that's out of the way, let's keep going. Anyway, the show is positioned in a spot where they have to walk a narrow tightrope, and additionally, the characters in it are sacred, right? I mean, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, Darth Vader / Anakin, as well as just characters like
Aunt
Uncle
Beru
Owen.
and Uncle Owen,
Right.
yeah.
Right. I mean, they really, it was great to see how many of these characters they got to return with their actors from the prequels.
Jimmy Smits, like anytime they give me Jimmy Smits, I'm going to have a big old grin.
Right. So, it's very easy to mess this show up in the way that I would submit they messed up Solo, right? They could, well, sure, that too. They could have made this show like Princess Leia sees like a Danish sitting on a table, and that's how she learned to have Danish hair, right? Explaining things that didn't need to be explained, insisting upon Star Wars so much that the show itself doesn't make any sense outside of Star Wars. You don't have a lot of moments in this show where they turn to the camera and they're like, "It's that guy. You know the guy, the one from Star Wars." I mean, there are those moments for sure, but I think a good example is the "hello there" line. They restrained themselves from dropping it until the very last episode, almost the last moment of the show. And it's like, thank you for not feeling the need to pander so heavily.
And when they did, my dog was sitting in my lap, and I said, "Winston, he said the thing. He said the thing he's supposed to say."
Right. And I think everybody was sitting there throughout the whole show like, when's he going to say it? And it's fine that he did say it, but I'm glad that wasn't the whole show. So in that respect, I don't think this show ruins the character of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I call that a victory right there. But when my standard for success is, I hope it doesn't ruin the character, I do have to also ask the question, did the show need to be made? And if it did, what is it doing? What is it doing that is good, that is adding to Star Wars?
Right. And that kind of led into my cautious optimism. It was a show that I was certainly looking forward to, but and you give me Star Wars, I'm going to watch it. But my cautious optimism said, the reason for that is kind of, do we need this? I think we have enough information about the relationship between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. And if they want to give me some more, I welcome it, as long as it's not going to be confusing or contradictory.
Right. And ultimately, I think where I land on that is the show did not add very much of substance. What little it did probably could have been accomplished in the span of a movie, which was, of course, the original plan. The other directions that it went, like establishing Reva's plotline, okay, that could have been cool, but it was it ate up enough screen time that it was like, okay, this is a big deal, but it didn't eat up enough screen time or attention to really be like, okay, this is a big deal. It was just kind of, it fell flat for me, not based on anyone's performances or based on any of the themes, but just based on its presentation. So ultimately, I felt like the show probably didn't need to happen, but it did have some very high highs that I enjoyed watching.
And I certainly agree with that point. Absolutely.
And I also think that it suffered from weak writing. Which
I won't disagree. I will say there's some moments with weak writing, and I will counter that with most of the time. Weak writing is backed up by very good direction. And that is any time. I mean that specifically any time we're not in an action scene. But clunky dialogue is certainly, that's not a thing that's new to Star Wars.
That's true. Not just the dialogue, though.
Okay.
Also the women and the children. No. Also just how characters get from point A to point B. We're just thinking through how does this make sense? An example is the whole of the fourth episode, Obi-Wan's infiltration of the base. The security on the base makes no sense at all, right?
Terrible.
What would be better security is if they just had security cameras. Right?
We need droids that we don't have enough of, and they're just going to make circuits in the hallway.
Yeah, right. Okay, that makes no sense, but okay, maybe technology in Star Wars didn't develop in a security camera direction. Fine. Okay. So but then you also have Tala sitting there at the command center with her little communicator, and she's like, "Hey, Obi-Wan Kenobi, can you hear me?" And everyone's like, "This is fine. I have no problem with this." And she's like, "I see you're coming up to the door." How does she see that? This doesn't make any sense. And she's like, "Don't worry, I'll open the door for you because I know what door you're at this huge thing. And I can see your location, but nobody else can." And it's like, okay, so you just haven't thought this through. Or you haven't devoted a lot of attention to it. You could have easily solved this by just having him put on a stormtrooper outfit from the stormtrooper you had him knock out. It's kind of lazy. And the Book of Boba Fett suffered from some of this too. It's they just didn't think through, make this a little bit more believable. And I have a theory as to what's going on here. It's that, I guess it's a question that I want to pose to the two of you. Who is the target audience for this show?
I think the target audience, and maybe Adam will have some other thoughts, but I think the target audience is us who are adults that were kids when the prequels came out and we were watching Ewan McGregor. You know what I mean? So it's there. My dad said he liked the show fine. He liked it better than Obi-Wan, and my dad has been a Star Wars fan since the late 70s, right? So it's probably not as intense as I am or as we are, but he saw the first Star Wars in the theater 45 years ago. So that's he's been with Obi-Wan for a lot longer than we have, and he's he was an adult when the prequels came out, and he kind of thinks they're bad to fine, and I think that they're fine to gloriously entertaining at moments. That's what I mean, and I am of the mind that not every Star Wars thing has to be made for every Star Wars fan, particularly when now there's so much of it. For the longest time there were 6 Star Wars movies, and that's the thing that you if you committed to it, you could sit down and watch Star Wars in a weekend, and you could see every bit of Star Wars that was okay. There Ewok movies and this and that, but you could, to be fair, because I'm going to get that in the comments, but you could watch the 6 Star Wars movies and you could get basically the whole story in a weekend, or you could sit down and over several days and watch one movie. You know what I mean? And now that's not possible because there's more, the combined runtime of the Clone Wars is several times over the length of the Skywalker saga. You know what I mean? So
sure.
It's, and my dad, for the longest time, he was he knew Obi-Wan, but he knew Alec Guinness, who has like I said before, has got a significant role in A New Hope, and he appears for a couple of minutes in Empire and Return of the Jedi, but that's it. And we have a trilogy where he's basically like he's one of the two main characters for 3 movies. Like in the first one, the Phantom Menace, it's kind of honestly hard to target who the main character is. Like Obi-Wan's probably the closest to that. And then he is, for the second and third movie, it's him and Anakin. Like Anakin's probably the lead, and he's it's funny to call the master character the sidekick, but he's like the secondary lead. But after a long-winded answer to your question that I've already answered, I'm going to come back and say that I think the intended audience for this show in particular is people like us who are adults, but we're young fans of the prequels, and we enjoy we have a lot more respect for the prequels than, for example, my dad does, that I just mentioned, and it's because we were the proper age when the prequels came out. What do you think, Adam?
No, it was my initial answer to that was that this is obviously for more diehard Star Wars fans. But then I remembered at the beginning of this series, they have a very comprehensive, previously on sort of moment where it covers everything from the prequel trilogy, which my fiance found great because she's watched all of Star Wars and she's just now getting into it, but she is not like me, who's like encyclopedic knowledge. Yeah,
actually, you mentioned your fiance. My wife said, like, while we're watching the first couple episodes of the show, the thing that annoys me about Star Wars is it's never clear when things are taking place, and she also she definitely appreciated having the prequel. Like the prequel recap, that they acted like this was the last 3 seasons of the show you're watching. And it's like, same thing. Like she's seen all the movies and we've watched the movies together, and she loves Hayden Christensen, but like they're not super fresh in her head. She doesn't eat and breathe Star Wars like the rest of us. So just to bring up similar situation to your fiance.
And let's be honest, like for us who do eat and breathe Star Wars, like the timeline of Star Wars is a constantly fluid thing that's just in my head. So when you tell me something happened at 7 BBY, I'm like, I know exactly when that happened. But if I tell her this happened at 7 BBY, so she's like, so which movie is that before? Where in this long string of things does that actually happen? Right.
It's before episode 4, but not as before episode 4 as the other thing.
Yeah. There's a big chunk of time between 3 and 4.
Rogue One was.
Yeah.
It's more before than Rogue One, but not as before as Solo, and maybe as before as Kenobi. Yeah, see, it's confusing.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
that makes me pump the brakes on saying this is more of a diehard Star Wars fan series, and really, I think this is more of the general public Star Wars fan series because it isn't as in depth. It doesn't delve too deeply into like why doesn't the Empire have security cameras? I don't know, maybe because Obi-Wan infiltrated that building is why they did have security cameras in the detention block on the Death Star.
I was gonna
like maybe they were like, oh crap, Obi-Wan sneaks into places. Let's put in security cameras. But like that's the kind of loophole there. That's the kind of small thing that you would notice or we would notice, and people probably don't think twice about it.
Well, I think you're right. Both of you, I mean, you've both described my answer as well, that this is a show for people in their 30s. And it's not, hugely reliant on a lot of Wikipedia knowledge, right? Like it is, it's easy. I mean, I watched it with my wife and she's like, she's seen the movie. She doesn't care that much. That being the case, though, it is a very different approach than the Star Wars movies, the prequels and the original trilogy.
I certainly agree with that.
Where like the episode 1, the Phantom Menace, it's like, okay, this is a movie for kids. But also there's a lot of content in there that's not for kids. It's like trade negotiation stuff, right? Like, okay, that's for adults. Like, Jar Jar Binks is explicitly not for adults. He is grating to adults. The trade negotiations are over kids' heads, right? And so you have discrete content for these different demos, and you kind of have the same thing like in episode 6, where the naming conventions for the Obi-Wan Kenobi episodes are the same as the movies. So when I say episode 6 right now, I mean Return of the Jedi. Where it's
we know, Chase. We understand.
Yeah. You've got the Ewoks, right? And it's like, okay, these are for kids. These are to sell toys, right? Like you can tell that some of this content is for kids, and some of it
George Lucas is the first
person
to tell you that my intended audience was 12-year-olds.
Right.
And he has admitted that he doesn't always hit the mark for making movies for 12-year-olds, but that was what he was aiming at the time. Right.
The sequel trilogy, I think, is a little bit more confused about its target audience, because it's like, hey, look, it's the Millennium Falcon. You love that, right? And a kid's like, what's that? An adult is like, it's the Millennium Falcon. But then the adult is like, okay, you're going to have to explain how Palpatine came back better than this. Like, you can't write this like it's a children's movie because I'm an adult. And that's how I felt about.
I think we're working. You bring up the Palpatine thing, and I think they're filling in some of that stuff on these live action TV shows.
Yeah, right. I think that the Mandalorian's touching on that. Bad Batch is touching on that. I think that you're exactly right. They're working on that, but nonetheless, the movie itself.
There's completely the information's completely absent from the movie.
Right, and so
you shouldn't have to watch 3 or 4 TV series and read 2 comic book series and 5 or 6 novels and 1 young adult novel to know what's going on.
All of which came out after the movie,
yes.
Right? Like
exactly.
Right. So, I mean, that's how I felt about this show. It's like, okay, it's not for kids because it's pretty the opposite of cartoonish, right? There's not a ton of levity. And yet it's not for adults either because they didn't take the writing seriously enough. And so it's kind of in this weird space where, like, it does have some high points, but it kind of, I think it fails to find its niche of who it's trying to serve. And I feel like the Star Wars franchise is falling into that a little bit, where it's like it is a little bit too afraid to take a position on who it's for. Because of how much backlash it gets from whichever party it fails to serve.
I will. We don't need to spend too much time talking about the prequels. It's happened ad nauseum. But like, I would say the things, like, the best decisions they make, the prequel movies, are the ones that try to change stuff that we know about Star Wars. And I'm not going to say that's 100% of the time, but I'm going to say all of the things that I like the best are like the thing that frustrates me the most about Star Wars right now is its unwillingness to change because they're afraid to upset their fans.
That's right.
And, okay, say what you will about The Last Jedi. There are things I love about that movie. There are things that I hate about that movie, but I applaud the willingness to try to try to change stuff. And we all know how that went, and we're not going to get anything like that ever again for a very long time.
Right. It's too bad, though, that this show, we find ourselves having learned nothing with the characters in the same position they were in at the end of episode 3 and in the same positions they'll be in at the beginning of episode 4. Because they're not willing to take a stance.
I'm going to push back on the we've learned nothing after Adam says how he feels about the show, because we haven't heard that yet.
Sure.
Well, before that, I want to touch on the point that we're kind of making right now, and that Star Wars is always kind of towing the line between the younger audience and the older audience, which is going to be the curse of a series that has before now released something every 20 years. Like, you're going to have young audience and you're going to have old audience. That's the way it works. But I think The Last Jedi and even Solo right after that, which I actually really liked Solo. I think it suffered more from blowback against from The Last Jedi, but that's a whole different discussion. Those two movies dealt with much more adult topics than any of the other Star Wars movies. And I think from the steering perspective of Disney, those were not good, and they did not do good things for Star Wars from a business point of view. So I can see them kind of trying to reroute and kind of trying to balance on that theme of, are we a kid's show or are we an adult show? So
it's difficult for me to believe that movies that made over $1 billion, or at least The Last Jedi, which made well over $1 billion, was a poor business decision. But again, we're not talking about The Last Jedi today.
Also talking about Disney, so business decision is a very different thing for Disney versus almost anyone else on the planet.
Well, that's true. It's also
like,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, like a lot of people like to say that Solo was a flop or Solo underperformed, but you can't tell me that Disney and all of their analysts don't have somebody who realized, like, well, maybe Solo, it wasn't just because of Solo, but people were really pissed off about The Last Jedi. So yeah, everybody went to go see The Last Jedi in the first 3 days before there were any spoilers, and then they were mad.
Yeah, it's pretty baffling. I wonder what is going on behind closed doors at Disney when it comes to these kinds of decision makings. Because like Solo, Kathleen Kennedy recently said, like, look, we learned our lesson from Solo. We're not going to recast any main characters. It was like, whoa. That wasn't.
Nobody had a problem with that in Solo. They did fine.
Right. You seem to fundamentally misunderstand what made Solo not work. And I agree, there may be issues related to The Last Jedi or not, but I think that the majority of people who didn't like Solo didn't like it because of the things where it was like, oh, here's how he got his last name. Oh, here's how he got his blaster. And it was like, we didn't need this. We didn't need to shrink the character of Han Solo. And that is like, that's the issue. And that seems to be what was misunderstood about the Book of Boba Fett as well. And what's so successful about The Mandalorian is that it doesn't suffer from those things because they got a new character who doesn't have any baggage, and he's meeting new characters.
The thing I want the most from Star Wars, and this is, again, coming from a person that really, for the most part, enjoyed the Obi-Wan show, I want Star Wars to give me content that has absolutely nothing to do with any characters I already know. Stop giving me shows that rub up against the Skywalker saga. Make up somebody new who's cool. Set him in a time period that separates him enough that we won't see anyone we've ever seen before, or her. Well, there are whispers of a female-led Star Wars show set in the High Republic era, and I would love that, just because the only character around that would make any sense would be Yoda, and sure, give me a Yoda scene for 3 minutes out of a 6-hour TV show and then move on. Like that, that's all I need.
On that subject, when they first announced High Republic, happens, between Old Republic and the prequel trilogy, and it's like in this nice 1,000-something year gap where you can do anything you could possibly want to do. And the first conversation I had with another Star Wars fan friend was like, why are they making a whole new time period? Why don't they just set it in the Old Republic? I was like, I don't know, because now they can just do their own thing and not piss anybody off.
Yes,
I agree. I like the idea, but a lot of Star Wars fans are like, but Old Republic's already cool. Why don't you do that? I don't know, because if you touch Old Republic, then they're just going to cut your throat.
You're going to have people be mad, and nobody wants to be mad about stuff. Like, I don't want to argue with my friends about Star Wars anymore.
I don't know what I would talk to them about then.
But we argued when there were only 3 movies.
Yeah, right. There's also still a possibility that they could just say like, oh, Old Republic is canon now. Like when they do the remake,
they canonized most of the important parts of Old Republic.
Right. So
they're remaking KOTOR as like a third-person action game. So then they could say, all right, this version of it is now the canon thing, if they wanted to do that.
Yeah, but like Darth Bane was in Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, "Oh, like, do you know who I am?" And Yoda's like, "Yeah, you're the one who made the rule of 2." Spoilers for anybody who hasn't watched Clone Wars. Sorry.
Okay. And Darth Revan was almost
been out for 10 years.
Darth Revan, the mask has shown up in canon materials, but not the character, to my knowledge, anyway. Right.
But I think that. Sorry. So this was kind of spooling in my head while we talked about that. But those shows are a perfect example that, like, we don't really have a problem when a Star Wars show bumps up against existing canon in Star Wars. And like, didn't watch Clone Wars until the entire series was out because I watched a couple episodes of the first couple seasons and it was terrible.
I had the same experience.
The first season of Clone Wars is and I was like, rough.
This is. I watched like a random episode that was on TV in my college dorm, and it was Jar Jar in the middle that fell into a geyser with some clone troopers, and I was like, this is absolute shit. Like I am not going to watch this, and I'm a Jar Jar fan, but I was not watching that. Then I heard that it was great, so once it was all out and on Netflix at the time, I watched the whole thing, and it was amazing. Similarly with Rebels, I watched the first half of the first season, and I was like, I'm only going to finish this because I bought the Blu-ray because I didn't have another way to watch it at the time, so I might as well finish it. And then I finished the first season, and it ends with the Grand Inquisitor being like, there are fates worse than death, and dropping, spoilers again. And like, holy crap, that's a great show. But those shows had seasons, much longer seasons than something like Obi-Wan, to figure out, okay, we're maybe a little too much on the kids. People like some things. Because I remember the thing that made me go back and watch Clone Wars was one of the later, the episodes in one of the later seasons when Dark Watch took over a village, and the village elders are like, please, can we just have our kids back, and please just leave, we're peaceful. And the leader of Dark Watch was like, yeah, here, have your kids back. And then as she's walking across to her grandfather, he stabs her through the back with a darksaber, and then he's like, burn the village. And they start burning the village, and I was like, holy crap, this is a kid's show.
Yeah, like people die on camera.
Yeah, like violently.
Like you just murdered a child in cold blood and then burned the entire village to the ground. I was like, okay, this is not Jar Jar Binks in a geyser with a couple dopey clone troopers.
Right.
Okay.
I was surprised to see Darth Vader kill a kid in Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, we'll get there. I want, before we move on to Darth Vader, because that's going to be a topic. Sure. I want to say, quick question first. Did anyone see the focus on little Leia as opposed to Luke? Because all of the, and to be fair, we only had a couple of shots of him in the trailer anyway, but like the trailer was definitely kind of what we expected it to be. Well, Obi-Wan kind of hiding out on a mountain watching Luke. And then, okay, they featured the Inquisitors, and we knew the Inquisitors were going to be there and we're going to mess something up. But like my expectation was the show was going to be kind of focused on Luke, and we know that Luke doesn't really know Obi-Wan, so my expectation was he was gonna leave Tatooine to try to lead the Inquisitors away before they found out about Luke. But then first episode, Leia gets captured by Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and that is an interesting direction Star Wars has taken kind of as a whole is an older mentor character and a child character that are come from very different places. That's like the whole hook of The Mandalorian, and yet again, it's the hook here, except even though they've done it before and done it very recently, I was all in for it. My wife and I were absolutely bonkers for little Leia. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, no, I think it was a great piece of misdirection that I think every shot besides maybe a couple like quick shots from the trailer was from the first episode. Mm-hmm. So once it started off, it's like, oh, well, now I have absolutely no idea where this is going, where I'd already formulated this plot line in my head.
I love that. We get
from the trailer.
15 minutes in and you realize I've seen everything from the trailer already.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that they did. And that they didn't do what they've done with some of the movies in the past few years, which is where they added completely fake footage to the trailers to just misdirect you. But it was a great piece of misdirection, and it just helped that I think her name is Vivian Lyra Blair, who played Little Leia, was absolutely the best character in the show.
I thought so too.
In the close second, she was phenomenal. And I remember the first episode ending, and my fiance was like, "Want her?"
Yeah, she was good. I mean, I thought, like, from start to finish, when we first see her on Alderaan and she just like owns her cousin, is like, yeah, that is Princess Leia, right? But they didn't feel the need again to lean into so much, like she can only say lines that Princess Leia has said, right? You know, like they didn't feel the need for like Obi-Wan Kenobi to come and rescue her, and she's like, "Aren't you a little short to be a Jedi?" Like, they didn't have to do that. Good. Thank you. Like, she could just be a character. I felt
this kid, she's 10 years old. She's being interrogated by an inquisitor with a lightsaber, and she's just I don't know. You got a juice box? She's just like fucking with the inquisitor. Like, she's not afraid of this person. And we're just like, all right. So Leia was awesome, even when Leia was a kid. Like, and you know, they probably prepared her for this, like, to whatever degree you can for a child. You know, like the Bail Organa's a prominent political figure, so, you know, and they have security around the house for that reason and that kind of thing. Like, I don't know, but it's just like little Leia just not being afraid of Reva. We were like, oh god, like, we were cheering. It was awesome.
Yeah, she was good. Also, I liked that. I mean, they spent a lot of attention in the last episode on the holster that they give her, and I was glad that was a holster we've never seen before, to my knowledge. It wasn't like, you know, it wasn't like a fan service holster. It was just something that meant something to her. Like, this is a dimension of her character which did not previously exist. And now, like, we have enriched the character in some way. We've added something to it. She has some experiences that were formative for her. And also, it's a thing that she thinks is cool as a 10-year-old, right? Like, that's great. I love that. I'm glad that it didn't have to be the exact holster she's going to wear on Endor. You know, like, it.
You say that, but I also, you know, when Obi-Wan buys the T-16, I was like, oh, he used that toy in the movie, you know. So they got me, and it's exactly the kind of lame gag you're talking about. But, you know, that would work for me, and maybe it shouldn't have because I'm a simpleton. But
that was kind of like, they didn't when he bought that toy and he tried to give it to Luke, it was kind of like a blink and you miss it kind of thing. It wasn't like, hey, you see this toy? He's going to love this toy when he's 19 years old, right? Like, they didn't have to underline
you see this gun? This is how Han Solo got this gun.
Right. The only gun he's ever loved. Like, what are you talking about? I always felt like Han Solo would just grab any gun laying around, and now you've shrunk Han Solo to, like, this guy who weirdly loves this one gun. And, like, they didn't do that with Leia. So I was appreciative that they could, right? Like, but they showed restraint in not leaning too far into that as to Leia.
Adam, thoughts on little Leia?
I think.
Excellent.
I mean, there's not much more to say. I'm always hesitant when a TV series, especially with something that ostensibly is going to deal with something as serious as, like, Obi-Wan and Anakin or Vader's relationship. Like, all right, one, where is this little kid going to fit in? And two, there's nothing against child actors, but are they going to live up to that? Or is it going to be
in
like...
In this case, we did. Like, there was, you know, a non-zero chance.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, there was a non-zero chance that this little Leia character was, like, horrifically irritating. And, you know, thankfully, it's nothing like that. But, you know, like, it could have been.
Right. And it's just one of the things, just from, you know, absorbing media for the last 3+ years of my life. It's like, is this going to work out? And I'm, again, glad to say that it absolutely did. But no, Leia was, again, the absolute best part of the entire series.
Yes.
Okay, I agree. To the point where like my wife was really invested in little Leia. And even like in the later episodes where things were getting really intense and stuff, like she would like almost zone out a bit when we weren't on little Leia. And then like even the big moment with Darth Vader and Obi-Wan, and they're having their duel. And she's like, so like little Leia wasn't there. So she was like watching, but like, she's like on her phone, and then she looks up and Darth Vader's helmet's exploded. And she's like, all right, I'm in. Like, we'll talk about that in a second.
Well,
but no, like
well,
this just that little Leia was
similarly,
definitely the highlight, was my point. And when that wasn't the focus, like I could feel my lady start to tune out a bit.
Well, similarly, my fiance, like when they were in the Inquisitor's Tower and Leia was getting tortured and Obi-Wan found all of the Jedi that were frozen in the blocks of ice, he was like, Obi-Wan, why are you taking so long? You have to go save Leia. Like, he was getting physically angry at Obi-Wan, just nonchalantly walking through the Hall of Jedi.
As much as I thought little Leia was great, I did feel like 3 chase scenes where like physically fit adults could not catch her.
And on that, I agree. Yeah, the weakness of the show is certainly most of the action doesn't really work. It's like, doofy on foot seats. And hey, that's like, we've never really had a great foot chase in Star Wars before, because in Star Wars there are spaceships and speeders and animals, and hey, you want to give me a cool foot chase? Give me one, because we don't have one. And this was not that. We didn't. Yeah, and it didn't work.
But the last speeder chase we had in Star Wars was super bad also.
Oh, that is true.
And I just...
Can you really call it a chase?
Right. I would prefer not to, for my namesake. It was very bad. We don't need to talk about Book of Boba Fett at this juncture, but I did kind of have flashbacks to like some bounty hunter running into a branch and being like, "Oh, dang it, this kid has outfoxed me."
Yeah. What Lucasfilm needs to do is find like one director who is actually good at directing chase sequences.
Yeah,
I just have that person do all of them and do. Yeah,
I'd be like, whatever the chase sequence is, like even if it's Leia running through the woods to get away from bounty hunters, that's fine. You can make it believable, and kids can like get through things and whatever. But like, make it not suck.
George Miller, director of Mad Max: Fury Road.
Yeah, that would be great. Although speaking of chase sequences, it kind of reminds me of another thing that you run into with a show like this, which is sandwiched by known entities, being episodes 3 and 4. Which
we
is
know
that
Obi-Wan can't die.
Yeah, and we know Luke's not going to die.
Nothing terrible can happen to Leia.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, it felt very tedious to be like, "Oh, did Luke die in the last episode? He fell off a cliff. Is he dead? Is Reva going to kill him?" Like, I know she's not. And it's fine for you to show him falling and she has to make a decision and everything, but you can't spend a lot of time on it.
Spoiler alert, Luke died and got replaced with a clone of himself in the original trilogy.
Well, and like the scene where he falls off the cliff, that scene is for her. That scene is showing her making the choice to not become Vader, which we can talk about her character later. But the scene where she brings Luke's limp body back and it's all dramatic and Maru's like, "Oh my gosh, is he alive?" And then we pause for 30 seconds before he finally gasps for air.
And Luke, by the way, doesn't look like he suffered any.
If he hasn't been breathing for this long, he is dead, or at least has serious brain damage. And number 2, we know that he's alive. And I mean, Luke in episode 4 maybe did have some brain damage. Who knows?
And Luke, by the way, did not look like he'd suffered any serious injury. Like he wasn't even dirty.
Right.
Yeah.
It just slid down a hill and suddenly unconscious for at least 5 minutes.
Yeah, right. He, I guess, had a concussion. Maybe they threw him in the back tank.
I will add one.
That if you're unconscious for more than like 20 or 30 seconds, it can be seriously bad. So,
Not in TV.
I hope he's okay.
Not in Star Wars. Like, look, I will add one thing I did appreciate about this scene where Rever comes to the camp and stuff. Is it's really Beru that's like, no, we prepared for this, and and we have this rifle in case exactly this happens, so we're gonna do the plan. Like they're Owen was kind of ready to cut and run, and Beru was the one that stood up and was like, no, we knew this would happen, and this is what we're gonna do. And I appreciated that moment.
That was one thing I wanted to talk towards, and it's on my short list of notes, because when we watched the final episode, our former roommate came over to watch because we'd watched the rest of the series, and he was like, "Man, what did Beru do in a former life?" I was like, "Well, one, they're frontier people, so they're used to fighting off Tusken Raiders from their property. Star Wars has already established that this is something that the moisture farmers on Tatooine deal with. They're not soft people. But two, if you think back to the limited interactions that we see between Beru and Owen in episode 4, like Owen is the one who's like preventing Luke from going away. He's the one who's afraid of change. He's not in any political sense, but he's the conservative one who wants to keep everything the same and not let Luke go. And he's the cautious one, whereas Beru is the one who's like, he's too much like his father. There's more to the galaxy. He has to learn that sometime. And it's a little nugget that we get of their individual personalities in episode 4 that I think both actors did phenomenally and the show did well, expanding on in the series.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was about to say. I think you're exactly right. It is true to the characters without being, just overly referential to the only things we know about them. But it's consistent with them. And that's the target that you want to hit with something about characters that we know. You want them to still be the same character and not just be a completely different person, like Boba Fett. But you also want to be doing something novel with them. Or else why make the show?
I agree.
And it like, I was worried for a moment that Owen's devout pacifism and like his avoiding, his sidestepping the issue as much as he can would almost make him a weak character, especially in the first episode. But then when he stands up to the Inquisitor the first time, okay, this isn't a weakness. This is just his defense.
Yeah. I don't want to hate on him too much.
It could have easily been a weakness for the character to be as elusive as he was.
Yeah. I mean, and when push came to shove, he stood up and said, "No, that's my kid, and I'm going to stand up. I'm going to stand up for this kid." Again, against a woman who's with a lightsaber that he has, frankly, no chance of defeating in a stand-up fight. And he stands up and he gets pushed off the bridge, but he does it, and that's just, it definitely leans into his convictions, even if he didn't really, his initial plan was to run, but once they determined they weren't going to do that, he stood his ground, and that's really commendable.
Yeah, it is. And, it's also, this show had kind of a consistent portrayal of the relationship between adoptive parents and their adopted children being a very valid parent-child relationship, which you don't get a lot of in the original trilogy. It's kind of like Owen and Beru are incinerated, and Luke's like, well, that sucks. I can't wait to learn more about my real father, and like Alderaan blows up and Leia's like,
did that happen on purpose?
That was Alderaan blowing up.
Okay. I like that there are teeth on your desk.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to get here where nothing is as it seems. But yeah, Alderaan blows up and she's like, oh, well. It's like
she's really upset about it right before it happens, and then once it happens, she's like, "Oh, okay,
right,
pretty okay."
it was good to kind of reinforce, like, I mean, these are their parents. Like, they do care. We haven't seen it before. They had other stuff going on, but like, this is a real relationship, and that's good.
Totally fair. Yeah, I agree.
Well, I think Brandon, to reference previous podcasts, you've made the point before about The Mandalorian, that The Mandalorian is a story about a good dad. And I think that this is just another example that Star Wars has realized, oh, we are a bunch of examples of really crap parents. Really needy kids. Like, that's the entire series, is terrible parents and needy kids. Like, well, none of my parents were well. I wonder if my real parents were good. Oh, he's literally the most deadly murderer in the entire galaxy. I have faith he's still a good person.
Right. Well, I mean, that leans into some of these like classic tropes about the son killing the father, you know, Zeus killing Kronos, and Kronos in turn had killed Uranus, and right, like this whole idea of the son
Greek
overtaking.
tragedy.
Right. I mean,
the life of Darth Vader,
trope.
the life of Anakin Skywalker, by the way, is a Greek tragedy. Straight up.
Yeah, which
absolutely. I mean, I think it was George Lucas or somebody else even mentioned that R2-D2 and C-3PO are the muses that would be in a Greek play. Yeah. That's why they're there through the entire prequel and original trilogy. Really, the story is through their eyes, one way or another.
Mm-hmm. I love that the prequels have afforded themselves the ability to be tragic because they precede an original trilogy that it does have the happy ending. So it's okay for the prequels to end with like, Padme died, Vader lost everything he cared about, and now he's like maimed and he's a slave, and Obi-Wan Kenobi's going into exile. You know, like, it's bad all around. And there's a glimmer of hope, I guess, but like, it's a tragedy, and you can't end a major blockbuster franchise on a tragic note like that unless you make it a prequel. And then it's like,
you have three more movies where everything turns out okay.
Right. But I love that they can put themselves in that position.
And on that note, I think that's what one thing that Kenobi does very well is, for the layman who hasn't watched all of Clone Wars and a significant amount of Rebels, to see especially Anakin's and then Darth Vader's development. One of the biggest problems with the prequels is like Anakin went from like, oh, I'm a Jedi, to wait, I'm not a master, to I'm going to murder everybody now. Really quick.
I was going to throw in, I saw a meme the other day that was like, badly explain the plot of a Star Wars movie, and then underneath it was episode 3, man doesn't get a promotion and kills all his coworkers.
Right. Yeah. You know, the content... Sorry, go ahead.
From that, we then go to the original trilogy where Darth Vader is this, you know, the monolith of terror that the entire galaxy is petrified of, but we don't see, like, all right, well, Anakin was kind of whiny 19 years ago, and now he's Darth Vader. What happened? And like, I watched Clone Wars, which the best thing Clone Wars did is renew it salvaged Anakin Skywalker as a character, because you got to see his entire decline and more of why, like, the problems in Anakin that made him become Darth Vader. And then in Rebels, you get to see more of what Darth Vader's doing in the interim. And I'm sure some of the books that I haven't read touch on the same subject. The best thing Kenobi does is it bridges that gap, and ending of Kenobi both allows Anakin to become darker. And Anakin's storyline doesn't end in hope. It ends in opposite. It puts Darth Vader in the place where he's going to be in 9 more years when we see him in A New Hope. But in the Kenobi and Luke and Leia storyline, hope that Obi-Wan didn't see at the beginning of the series is now that glimmer of hope for him and their storyline.
Yeah,
it's the crossfade.
Right, and I mean that's what you have to hope for from this show, right? Like that's what this show has to be seeking to accomplish, because it can't substantially change anything about Darth Vader or Obi-Wan Kenobi. It can only show or flesh out how we get from point A to point B. And I loved that we had the opportunity to visit these characters at this time, it's great to see Darth Vader like. Other times we see Darth Vader. We see him in the original trilogy, and he's kind of clunky, but he's like an enforcer guy for the Empire, and you don't really get a sense of scale for just how powerful he is compared to how he's portrayed in some of the other media that's come out.
And this show.
Right. So this show, well, to continue to visit his other appearances, in Rogue One, you're like, okay, dang, this dude's powerful. Like, he just wrecks all these
Darth
guys.
Vader is terrifying.
Now,
yeah, there's like a bunch
I see why he's so scary. A lot of people didn't like that scene because they felt like it was too much fan service. It was pandering, but I felt like it was important to show Darth Vader's as scary as they say he is. And
I always argued we should have cut out the earlier scenes from Rogue One that had Vader, and he should have just shown up at the end in the hallway and murdered everybody, and it just left you with an oh fuck moment.
Yeah, I think that's important. And in Rebels, you also get the sense that like this dude is out of this band of rebels league. Like, they have to dance around the Inquisitors. That's more their level. Darth Vader, you just got to run when that dude shows up.
If you get Darth Vader's attention, then it doesn't last long for you. And you say that like that's the have you played the Fallen Order video game?
One.
Yeah, and they're
right.
It's the main villain for the majority of the game is an Inquisitor, and then right at the end, Darth Vader shows up because he's sick of this Inquisitor fucking up all the time. Like, and that's the Cal's master just looks at him and says, "It's Darth Vader. Fucking run!" Like that's all you can do is run away.
That was so awesome because it's at the end of the game, and you're feeling strong. You're feeling like
you just beat the Inquisitor.
I can beat anybody. And you fight Darth Vader for a second, and he's like, yeah, like that combo you use, it doesn't work on me. And nothing you do is going to work on me. Run. And the whole time you're running, you're platforming through, like, he's just destroying everything around you.
Destroying the whole room. And you're underwater. Like he's just going to drown. Like
right. And so you really get a sense of scale for his power. And that's all important and good. But I guess this is all roundabout to get at what this show offers is not just that. You do see in this show that he's very powerful, and like especially when Raven tries to fight him.
Yeah, and he doesn't even have a sword. He's just
right. Like okay, this dude is for real, and good because we knew Anakin was for real. So like, how many steps has he lost? Oh, is it none? I mean, in the old legends, it was like, okay, he's lost quite a few steps by being maimed. In the canon, it seems like, I don't know, maybe he's still stronger than ever, and fine. But they really showed that. But what this show showed that hadn't been shown before is that he's not just doing these things as a slave without agency in service of the Empire or the Emperor, right? Like, every other appearance we've described, he's doing a job. Like, he's not killing all those guys in Rogue One and segueing into the original trilogy because like he hates them. He's killing them because like they're in his way in the performance of his job as the Empire.
He's trying to make sure their secret weapon doesn't get found out.
Right. In this show, it's very personal. He's like, I hate you, Obi-Wan Kenobi. The last thing I said to you was that I hate you, and I really meant it. I am going to torture you in fire. Like, that's how much I hate you. This isn't just like we need to eliminate this guy because he's a strategic threat to the Empire. This is like, this dude in particular, I strongly dislike him. And so we really see like Vader's evil and full of hatred, and it makes his redemption more meaningful because we see where he's being redeemed from.
I agree. And you know what? I loved first of all, we get Sheev at the end. We get a little holo call with Palpatine, like, and it has to be Palpatine that's like, you seem agitated, my friend. Like but Palpatine has to rein him in and remind him, like, you have a purpose, and if you're not doing your job, you're useless to me. So it's just like, get this personal shit out of your head and remember what your job is. Like,
Yeah, I thought that exchange was cool, but also complex, because aren't his passions supposed to be what makes him strong in the dark side? And yet Palpatine insinuates that he's being weakened by his passionate obsession and hatred for Kenobi, which makes,
I would say by distraction.
Maybe so, but I mean, also he describes to Luke that his anger gives him focus, right? I mean, those are his exact words, and I mean, in one sense, it makes sense that maybe Darth Vader fighting Luke, he loses to Luke because like he's kind of losing his hold on the dark side, right? He's conflicted, he's out of balance, and he's also just learned also Leia is his daughter, right? Like so maybe that's why he can't hang with Luke. And maybe that's what's happening here with Obi-Wan. He still has some attachment to Obi-Wan, but what Palpatine says to him is very reminiscent of what the Jedi would say to him, which is like, let go of your attachments, right? Like, and it was always my impression that was in opposite to the Sith's position on
I
attachments.
agree with
like,
you.
You should do whatever you want.
I would say there is a reason, and it is because even at this stage in Darth Vader's apprenticeship, or whatever it is that you would call it, as a Sith to a master, like Palpatine knows that Anakin or Darth Vader is a threat to him. So if Anakin goes off and if Darth Vader finds out that he can accomplish his own goals, then what if Darth Vader's goal is become the Emperor? And that's a moment we get with Luke later on, right before he cuts off Luke's hand and says, I am your father. The whole thing is, if you come with me right now, we can rule the Empire. Like that was right. The two of us together can take this guy. And maybe that is he doesn't want Darth Vader to become a threat. And I think, like you're absolutely right. It was short, and the words are chosen very specifically, I feel, as opposed to maybe some other dialogue in the show. But like it's Palpatine has a really specific agenda in saying the things he does. Because I think, if
he knows what's going on.
Yeah, if there's anyone you don't want on your bad side, it's Darth Vader. Like, sure. And also that Palpatine has always been a step ahead of everybody.
Luke,
like Adam just said, he knows what's up.
With Luke happens after Obi-Wan is dead.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like Obi-Wan's dead, and he's like, let's become Emperor.
Right. I buy the... I totally buy, because it's well reasoned, that interpretation that like Palpatine has his own motives for saying what he's saying.
Palpatine's always a step ahead of everybody.
Right, but my question is, I guess, is it true what he said, that Vader is perhaps weakened by his obsession with Kenobi? It would make sense in the way that Vader got bodied by Obi-Wan in the fight they just had. That didn't make a lot of sense to me. That's a whole can of worms to open that maybe we can talk about in a few minutes. But
we're going to wrap up with Darth Vader. I have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of like, is it true that he's weaker because of this?
I don't know that it's true. I think Palpatine wants him to believe that it's true.
Sure, I buy that.
And maybe it's that Palpatine sees that. Twice now that he's fought Obi-Wan, and this time he had him dead to rights. He didn't actually kill him. It's the same weakness is a term I guess you could use, but it's the same ending that Obi-Wan chooses, which is, I've left you for basically dead now twice, and you're not dead. And either one has willingness to complete that final step. And maybe that's the weakness that Palpatine sees. It's like not the obsession. Like, yeah, you hate Obi-Wan, but weakness in the obsession is your inability to just overcome it, because Vader probably could have killed Obi-Wan when he was in the bottom of that pit. He really tried, and that's the point.
Or in the third episode with the fire scene. I mean, that is a scene that I thought was very striking as it was happening, but certainly like Obi-Wan's escape from that scene didn't make any sense.
I'd agree with you on it was really intense when I watched it, and there were a couple of episodes I watched again. I watched the third, I watched 3, 5, and 6 like a couple of days after they first aired. So I've seen several of them twice, and that was the fire scene, and then the moments immediately following it I wouldn't say work as well as they could.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like Vader was literally just force holding Obi-Wan at that distance with the fire there and pulling him into the fire. And then suddenly he's like, there's nothing I can do. Oh, he probably could have just walked through the fire. Maybe Vader's afraid of fire, but like, I'm making that up.
Like he could have force grabbed the droid.
Right. There are so many things he could have quelled the fire with the force, right? Like
the fire isn't even that big. Anything. He could have walked around and still gotten the guy.
Right. Right. Also, all his stormtroopers have guns. Like it didn't make any sense. And that's kind of another example of just like, this seems like contrived and lazy writing that doesn't cut it in a show that you expect adults to be watching. The other one that really stands out in my mind is when Vader's in his Star Destroyer chasing this little dinky unarmed ship full of refugees, and they're like, we just can't catch them. It's like, use the tractor beam like we know you can do in episode 4, or like send out TIE fighters, like do literally anything. You can't. How pathetic is this Star Destroyer? It can't destroy any stars. It can't even destroy this one little ship. If they had a hyperdrive, they'd be gone.
There are only 2 times that a tiny ship has run away from a Star Destroyer in Star Wars, and both of those have been under Disney. It's this and in The Last Jedi. Every other time, they send out TIE fighters or something.
The Millennium Falcon does it through cunning.
Deception more so than just flying really fast.
They sent out TIE fighters.
Yeah,
the TIE fighters pursued them into the asteroid field.
Yeah, and so then I looked up, like, have they not invented TIE fighters yet at this point in history? And they have. So there's, there wasn't really any reason.
Didn't you watch The Last Jedi? If the TIE fighters get too far away, they'll be out of range of support and will leave the fleet weak. Something like that.
Right, and I mean, so TIE fighters are designed to be, like, cheap. And not long range.
It's a cardboard box with 2 engines on it.
Right, and that's very much like in Tarkin's, in the Tarkin novel.
Yep.
He's very much like, hey, and also in Bad Batch, he's like, we need to reform our whole military. The Republic's military is very expensive. We just need to be cheap and just lean into numbers. And like all this stuff is expendable. Like we have a whole galaxy of resources that we can just take. So we can just outnumber any opposition. And so like stormtroopers are worse soldiers than clones, but they're also vastly less expensive. And that was kind of the philosophy that Tarkin introduced to the whole Empire's military. So TIE fighters are not as good as like the Jedi starfighters in the prequels that they have like hyperdrives, right? Or they can plug into hyperdrives and stuff. And, they're not as good, but that's a minor point. And certainly they could have interacted in this show. It just wasn't thoughtful writing, but I have derailed from talking about the characters, Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi. I have a question for you guys, which is, what was Obi-Wan Kenobi's arc in this? He starts off the beginning of the show. He has like virtually no connection to the Force. He's down on the whole notion of caring to fight back. By the end of it, he's full of hope. He's more powerful than ever, I guess. And he's like, I have found balance. What happened in between that made that happen?
My thought is he hasn't been practicing the Force. He's so he's a little rusty. He may have even disconnected himself in a way that kind of Luke did in The Last Jedi, but like it's not about that. Like he's focused on protecting Luke, but more so it is more the belief that I killed my best friend. Like at best, I failed him. At worst, I killed him. And then through his experiences with Leia and stuff, okay, he learns like there's still stuff out there worth fighting for, first of all. And then through his encounters with Darth Vader, like he learns it wasn't his fault. Like it was Anakin's choice to become Darth Vader, and it was Darth Vader who killed Anakin, not Obi-Wan. And that Darth Vader, in a way, like in a straight, like I don't want to say strangely because I think it worked, but like an uncharacteristically compassionate scene that we don't usually get from Darth Vader just kind of tells him like, this isn't your fault. This was all me. Like I wanted this. And, and that kind of like within Obi-Wan absolves him of the guilt that he had. That's kind of how I read it, and I don't know that it 100% works, but I think that was the intention, and I think it works well enough, and that's why, he finds his center, he reconnects with the Force, and he's ready to come back into the fold if they need him at the end, and that's why he's finally able to see Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon says, "I'm always here. You weren't ready to see me yet." And it's because he was carrying around all this guilt that Anakin and Darth Vader just released him from. Like, it was a big ball and chain on his ankle, and then Darth Vader comes up with his lightsaber and cuts off the ball. So does that make sense? Like, am I on the right track? What do you think, Adam? Hold on, Chase.
Almost
your
works,
Chase is
but I
going
want
to
to what Adam
retort.
says.
Yeah,
I
hold
want
on,
to
Chase.
hear
What do you think?
Well, two things. One, I think that's half the point, which I'll cover more in a second. Number two, minor nerd beef. Qui-Gon Jinn's Force Ghost showing up at the end, at least in the old Legends canon. Qui-Gon Jinn found a way to come back from the nether realms of the Force, but because he didn't figure out the process wholly, so he didn't physically become one with the Force. That's why they burned his body. So we really should have just heard his voice like they did in the original deleted scene in Episode 3. The whole like Qui-Gon Jinn's Force Ghost being there, don't get me wrong, Qui-Gon Jinn is my favorite Jedi, so I love it. But at the same time, nerd beef. That's wrong.
Yeah.
But to the point of John's arc, Anakin is half of it. So he finds his brother, he finds out he's alive, but on top of that, it's not just that he failed and thinks that he killed his best friend who he viewed as a brother, but that best friend who he thinks he failed killed all of the Jedi. And at the end of Episode 3, they reverse the beacon at the Jedi Temple and say, maybe if there are other Jedi, this will warn them to stay away. But as far as he knows, Yoda is the only other Jedi alive. Because he's cut himself off. He's not out there seeing the way the world is.
I'll just throw in that there are hints at other ones, like Quinlan Voss gets name dropped in the show, etc.
Well, I'm getting to that.
Yeah.
I'm getting to that. But for Obi-Wan, like, we know from like Rebels and other things that there are other Jedi that survived the Purge. But Obi-Wan doesn't know that. As far as he knows, it's him and Yoda, and they're the only two left in the entire galaxy. And he certainly hasn't been training anybody new. So he thinks that beacon of light that he views the Jedi as is out in the galaxy. But by him getting off the Tatooine to go save Leia, he encounters, almost stumbles upon, the underground network of people saving Force sensitives and Jedi, and even sees people that he knew carving their name on the wall. And I think more, maybe not more so, but equal to finding out that Anakin is alive and Darth Vader telling him, you didn't kill Anakin, I did, was Obi-Wan saying that, no, the Jedi aren't all gone, and more importantly, the beacon of hope that they gave the galaxy is still lit in the eyes of many people in the galaxy.
All right, talk to me, Chase. What do you think?
I think both of those things, I had those thoughts as well. But so I guess to crystallize the two things, one is I guess not forgiveness, certainly not forgiveness. The rejection of
Anakin does not forgive him.
Absolution from Anakin's death, and then also despair over the Jedi being extinguished. As to feeling guilty for Anakin's death, Obi-Wan had already gotten his groove back before he had that conversation with Anakin. The Anakin saying, like, you didn't kill me, like, I killed me, like that that happened after Obi-Wan Kenobi was already like, look at what I can do with the Force with all these rocks, right? Like, like Obi-Wan had already regained his powers, and Vader even says, like, oh yeah, you've gotten your power back. And then on top of that, does a feat that we haven't really ever seen anyone do at that scale. I mean, okay, I take that back. We have seen feats on that scale and greater. Vader just caught that ship as it was flying away. Like, we have seen some big time Force use, but you know, we've seen people move rocks around. We haven't seen people move that many rocks around.
Apparently that's a Force power from the Old Republic video game, because my buddy who watched it with me was cheering when Obi-Wan started doing that. I don't know. I never played it.
Rey levitates a million rocks at the end of The Last Jedi, but not in an aggressive way. She just kind of moves them out of the hole.
Oh yeah, right. But I mean, to just like machine gun rocks at somebody isn't something we've quite seen done in that way, and at least not in canon. And it's like, okay,
Darth Vader does it with some debris and stuff, but yeah, certainly not to this scale. Yeah.
No, well, and that's actually one of the few notes that I do have on my little sheet of paper is that we'll call it Super Force is coming back into canon, which, like, back in the day, Force Unleashed did it in video games because that was cool, but especially since really Rise of Skywalker, it started to come back up, and there's always been like cells of it in some of the comics and stuff. But like Rise of Skywalker had Palpatine lightning an entire Starfleet in the sky. And it was like, what the fudge is going on here?
Right. Anyway, Obi-Wan Kenobi seems like he's stronger than ever. This happens before his conversation with Vader. So I don't think that can be the source of his development. Now, having hope that
but
they're
right
Jedi,
before that, the recap that he sees, the flashback that he has, is seeing Luke and Leia, which I think directly ties to the Jedi,
sure,
the hope of the Jedi still being in the galaxy.
Right. I think that there's plenty to that, except we don't see him interested in that. Like when that Jedi is on the run from the Inquisitors on Tatooine and comes to him, he's not like, oh, I didn't think there was anyone. He's just like, nah, get out of here, kid. Like, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that like, oh, maybe we can maybe there's hope. There isn't hope. Get over it. And so it's kind of like, I mean, from that exchange, it's like, I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't the first Jedi he's encountered. He's just seen how this goes, and it doesn't go well. And he needs to keep his head down, and that's the only way he can get by. And so I do think that changes. And I do think that they make the case that the reason it changes is because of his interactions with Leia. His interactions with Luke don't do much for that because that pre-existed as well, right? Like, he's been watching Luke for years. So nothing's
true.
changed.
And in the flashback scene when he's buried in rocks, it's literally all Leia and then the one 2-second clip of Luke sitting on top of the house, because that's all we've seen so far. So, yeah.
Right.
Mainly Leia.
But I feel like they could... I need a stronger through line for what has happened with Obi-Wan, because I agree these are all explanations that work. But considering the entire show is about his rehabilitation, I need to know what his rehabilitation is. And it could be accomplished with a single line. But it seems like they're just expecting you to be like, look, he's fine now. And I was like, okay, why? Like, how about something like, well, if I were making this show, I would have had him meet Qui-Gon when he's at his lowest, maybe midway through. Instead of Obi-Wan gradually ramping up and being stronger and stronger each episode. I would have had him at his lowest and he's like at his wit's end, and that's his breakthrough with Qui-Gon. And
I will throw in that, you know, like Luke was kind of bleeding to death in the snow with no friends for 100 miles, and that's when he first saw Obi-Wan's Force Ghost. So that's a good point.
Right, and that would be like that can be someone who comes in and says like, Obi-Wan, you're on the wrong path, right? Like, or like, here are some things you're not considering. Here's how you can reconnect with the Force in a way that is not about throwing rocks real good. It's about like your mental state. It's about being in balance. We didn't hear the word balance once, and yet that is what this is about. It's about Obi-Wan finding balance again. And what does that mean? I felt like that was unclear to me. There are threads to pull on, but for such a central theme of the show, I really wanted that to be better developed.
That's not how the Force works, Chase.
Yeah.
Well, I think Disney, and rightfully so, is a little timid talking about the Force, because the only time anybody talks about the Force and how it works on a personal or on a more meta level, it's not from the original trilogy. Star Wars fans tend to think it's stupid.
Well, you see, there are these microscopic organisms inside your cells.
Yeah, you know, the midichlorians are bad, but other than midichlorians, we get a lot of actually really interesting insight into the light side and the dark side and how the Jedi and the Sith observe those forces to exist from the prequels, from Clone Wars, from times when they're willing to engage with it. And I agree that Disney is not willing to engage with it, but they should, because that's like kind of important. And they have to, like, sometimes you have to take a stance on something. You have to say something affirmative about what a thing is about, what a thing is meant to convey. Like, art should have something that is trying to communicate. And it is not good enough to simply have the thing that it's communicating being, these characters, they're still here. Like, it needs more than that. And I think this show did that, but I wanted it to do it more and more convincingly.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Great. The Disney verse of Star Wars needs to figure out how to talk about the Force, because outside of the animated series, they've been afraid to do so.
Right. Or how to talk about the Empire, or like anything of the only crime the Empire has committed, for the most part, is they're hunting down Force sensitives. That seems to be it. Other than that, like, what are they doing that's bad? In the Ahsoka novel, we see that they're kind of like taking over a planet to just extract resources to feed their military, and they're cruel to the people there. Okay, I need more of that, because there is the contingency of people who are like, the Empire did nothing wrong, right? Which is like plainly untrue, but considering that the whole thing is that they are the epitome of evil, and the Sith are evil, and the dark side is evil, like, what are they doing that's so bad if you're not a Jedi? If you're Jedi, they're super bad.
I think that's part of the Empire's MO, because the Empire's existence depends on its people thinking that they are safer because the Empire exists. Or at least that's kind of the spin that Palpatine put on it, right? So, like, there are probably a number of systems that don't care what the government looks like as long as they feel like they're safe at home.
Sure. Are they not?
They do the hat tip to that in Rogue One when Jyn Erso's like, who cares what flag is flying as long as you don't look up? And I feel like that's a nod to how a lot of the galaxy feels. But on a similar point, I think Kenobi is the first attempt, at least in the live action series, to kind of address crimes of the Empire, because they do talk about them slaying en masse the Force sensitives, which is what leads I don't remember the character's name, but the officer to defect and start being Jedi. And it reminds me, I remember an argument that I saw once online years ago, which was, why can't we have a story about like it was right after Battlefront 2 came out, and the storyline of Battlefront 2 is you're an Imperial officer for like the first two missions, and then you're like, oh crap, the Empire is terrible, and you become a rebel. And the person's point was, why can't we just have a storyline about, it's the noble Wehrmacht story of like, why can't just the dude be in the Imperial Army and be proud to be part of the Empire, but not really get that the Empire is doing all the wrong stuff? It's like the reason all of the characters that we follow who are in the Empire eventually leave the Empire because it is that bad. But so far, the live action series have not portrayed why the Empire is that bad.
Right. I mean, they definitely persecute Force sensitives, but also it's not clear how common it is that a Force sensitive person occurs. It seems like once upon a time it was very rare. I don't know. Maybe it's not.
There aren't that many Inquisitors, right? And it happens seldomly enough that a crew, like, maybe a little crew of maybe 12 people, like, and they actually they have purge troopers, which are like stormtroopers specifically outfitted to combat Jedi. But, if the purge troopers, they just follow the Inquisitors and there's only a dozen Inquisitors or maybe less than that, there probably aren't that many Jedi left. And they know that because they're like, the galaxy is unfathomably vast, right? And knowing that bit of information, and also the fact that the crew that's purpose is to eliminate the Jedi, like there can't be that many Jedi.
Right.
That's just my thought on it.
This is the great victory of the holiday special, which is that we get to see the Empire actually being oppressive, right? Like they're coming into these Wookiees' house and they're like, you can't celebrate your holiday. Life Day, not on our watch. Oh, also, we barge into people's houses to tell them what to do all the time. This is normal for us. And it's like, okay, I see how the Empire is bad. And Luke makes a comment in episode 4. He's like, I hate the Empire as much as anybody. Why? You live in the middle of a desert. Like, what is the Empire?
You live far enough away, the Empire probably doesn't care about you. Like,
on a planet where in the Kenobi episode, somebody was like, this is the Outer Rim. You don't have any power here, when the Inquisitor stood up and like stared her in the face.
Then again,
she got stabbed.
We may have gotten some context about that, though, because the Inquisitors show up on Tatooine looking for somebody, and they string that guy up, or they find a Jedi, maybe that who wasn't who they were looking for at first. I don't remember, but they string that guy up in the town square, and they're like, we're the Empire, and this is what happens if you help people like this. And that in a little town like that, like that's probably a story that goes around pretty fast. So but again, that comes back to, what does the Empire do that's bad other than kill the Jedi?
Right. It sure seems like it's something, but we never see it.
Maybe we'll get some.
But to the point of Luke, I mean, this is the same character. He hates the Empire as much as anybody, and maybe his experience with the former Grand Inquisitor as a child maybe leans into that a little bit. But he was also earlier, like 10 minutes earlier in the movie, trying to convince his uncle to go to the Academy, which was the Imperial Academy. So obviously, he hates the Empire as much as anybody.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like. In order for Disney to portray why the Empire is bad, they have to make a political decision about what is something that is bad that they can do. And they're not willing to do that. The prequels were not afraid to do that. Some people would view their willingness to tread in politics as a distraction from the fun spaceships. And I mean, Star Wars can mean different things to different people. So fair enough if that's what you want out of it. But without that, you have a tough time making the case that this government is evil. Is Palpatine a bad ruler? I mean, is he doing things? Is he incompetent? Is he living large and everybody else has nothing? This is all unclear. We have no idea what life is like in the Empire.
And that if I am totally honest with you, Chase, isn't something that I have really considered before literally this conversation. Like, what is the Empire doing that's so awful? You know, I mean, there's always the folks that come through and they were like, you blew up the Death Star, and there were probably hundreds of contractors that were just doing their job and never committed an act of evil, but they all died too.
The problem is, and this begins to toe into politics, which is always a sticky situation when you're talking online, but it is incredibly frustrating when I see people who are like diehard longtime Star Wars fans, and they're like, can Disney Star Wars do anything but be liberal politics because you're fighting the Empire? And it's like, bro, like literally the Empire is definition fascism.
Yeah, and I mean,
opposing it is going to be left of fascism no matter what you do.
Yeah, and like George Lucas was explicit that like, oh yeah, the rebellion in the original trilogy, they're the Viet Cong. Like, this has never been like
right.
Subtle, right?
George Lucas has always been like a big stick it to the man kind of guy, and that's all over Star Wars.
And he is probably, I mean, he's not in his grave, but he's thinking about rolling over in his grave at Disney controlling his life's work in a very big corporate way.
And not willing to toe. Well, I mean, I guess they do toe the line because they toe it just enough to piss off a certain percentage of people without making everybody or all of those people just stop watching Star Wars. But I saw somebody post a thread from Reddit or something online the other day, and somebody was like, "It's great if Star Wars talks about politics, but are they ever going to talk about anything other than liberal fluff like maybe taxation is theft?" And somebody posted the first line of the opening crawl from episode 1, which is like, taxation of outlying trade routes has divided the Republic. Bro, can you even try?
Right. Well, and I struggle to understand what that critique is getting at. Like, if it were the case that Star Wars was constantly like in the Disney era was constantly like making political statements, and you don't like them, okay, you can complain about that. But that's not what is happening in Star Wars. What is it that has happened in any Disney content that is political to an unacceptable extent, other than they have characters who are people of color? But like, that's not even a political thing. That's and it's sad to see it happen every time another thing is released, including this show with Moses Ingram.
Just a lot of people being racist for no good reason.
Most political thing they've done.
Well, actually, there's never a good reason to be racist.
Where they're like, good guys can kind of be bad as well. So it's the entire opposite way.
Right, the Canto Bight sequence. Yeah, I mean, that was a very interesting sequence that really kind of drove home, like, in a similar vein to, hey, what is the Empire doing wrong? Kind of seeing like, look, there are a bunch of people profiting from this nonstop war, which, like, of course there are. It's not new to the Star Wars canon that there are companies like the CNR company, the Zerka Corporation, right? Like, these are established entities, especially in Legends, who, like, yeah, this is what they do. They make weapons and stuff. They make starfighters. Like, they love this stuff. Great that we can see them. Like, that's a dimension of the universe that we don't see often, except like maybe Jabba the Hutt.
In books and video games, because I mean, I still remember playing the original N64 Rogue Squadron, and if you hovered over something, it would give you a little voiceover. It's like the Incom T65 X-Wing. Yeah, there's the brand name.
Right.
Mark.
So this is an interesting discussion for sure, but we're kind of spinning off a little bit, and we're over 90 minutes now. So I want to come back around to the thing that I've been promising, and I want to talk about Darth Vader in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. And we've touched on a couple of things, but I'm going to start and say overall, I was worried about Darth Vader. You know, like, Disney has been sparing with him, and wisely so. And up to this point, I think they've generally handled him very well. I love both of his scenes in Rogue One. He has that conversation with Director Krennic, and Director Krennic is terrified of him. And then there's
I would venture to say that is the only scene I don't like with Darth Vader since the Disney.
Okay.
In the Disney
and
canon,
then there is
because I think it was unnecessary, but I've already touched on that.
Well, that's fair. Yeah. And then there's the epic scene in the hallway that we've touched on. And then there's a lot of material with Darth Vader in Rebels, particularly in the second season when they encounter Ahsoka as an adult, and then they follow up with a lot of stuff with Darth Vader.
Because I don't think he's in the first season at all, because it's only at the end of the first season when the Grand Inquisitor infers that he exists. And that's, the best line of the entire first season is when Kane's like, "I can save you," and he's like, "There are fates worse than death." Like, whoa.
Which he still ends up suffering a fate worse than death, it turns out, because he's sentenced to eternally be a ghost, and he fights Luke Skywalker later. I don't think it's that cool, but sorry, go on.
Yeah. So going into the show, I was like, okay, you're bringing back Hayden, and that's awesome. Everybody loves Hayden except for people who claim they don't love Hayden, and they actually love Hayden anyway. But yeah, so my question was, what are they going to do to justify involving Hayden Christensen? Because again, we've had Darth Vader before, and Hayden wasn't there. Hayden Christensen didn't have anything to do with Rogue One. Even though Darth Vader appeared in live action. And it's okay, you're telling me are you telling me Hayden's in the suit? Great. And we have one shot in the third episode where Darth Vader's getting assembled and you see Hayden for a moment. But they really earned it, in my opinion. I want to say episode, is it 4 or 5, where they have the great flashback with Anakin and Obi-Wan, where it's your desire to win is going to ruin you. And guess what? That's kind of a thing that happens to him. But no, I just want to say that I thank you, Hayden Christensen, for coming back and doing this and making, keeping Darth Vader scary. And they've done things with Darth Vader that we have never seen him do, or any Force user do before in live action. They in The Rise of Skywalker, they caught the shuttle with the Force, but it seemed like Rey kind of struggled with it. And Darth Vader's just no, you're not leaving yet. And a giant spaceship stops, and he pulls it to the ground and he tears it apart.
If only his Star Destroyer could do the same.
And then nice. And then in the next scene, Reva is, and we mentioned this earlier, Reva is trying to kill him with a lightsaber, and Darth Vader fights her off without a weapon just by stopping her blade with the Force. And then,
can I just say, the whole, if you're going to sneak up some, behind somebody with a lightsaber, you got to do the Kylo Ren thing where you just hold it behind their head and then turn it on. Don't turn it on and swing, because it goes.
I think she even yelled beforehand. It's why are you doing this?
And that's drama. That's
sure.
That's film. Sure. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So it all builds up to the moment where, first of all, Darth Vader basically wins, and then we get they don't say I have the high ground, but Darth Vader has the high ground, and he buries Obi-Wan, and then Obi-Wan has an inspirational.
I was so glad that he didn't.
Yeah, it would have turned that
for him to say
it would have made it a joke.
Really, it would have made it a meme. Yeah, instead of a scene where they're experiencing emotions.
Yeah, and Obi-Wan has this motivational flashback memory, and he digs his way out of the hole, and he comes and he kicks Darth Vader's ass, and the big build is he cuts Darth Vader's helmet open, which has actually happened. It happened in the end of season 2 of the Clone Wars, of Rebels, which everyone should watch, because that's another moment where Darth Vader's presence is absolutely chilling. But yeah, to see
gave him the gash.
Yeah.
I think he had it when he was in the Bacta tank in an earlier episode of this show. I was also oh, it's the gash. So I went back and looked, and I think it was still there already.
anyway, so you see Darth Vader and you see Hayden's eye, and they mix their voices together in a really cool way, because Darth Vader's voice is actually modulated. It's
really
like
cool.
Yeah, and it's and again, earlier on, like my wife had kind of tuned out for a couple of minutes, and then that happened. She's like, "All right, I'm in. This is incredible." Like, and it's all I want to say is, like, Darth Vader is one of the if not he is one of the greatest characters in the history of cinema. And you know, the original actor who portrayed him inside the armor has passed away, and the actor who gives the voice for Darth Vader, James Earl Jones. I'm sorry, it was David Prowse, by the way. I want to make sure I throw his name in there. And James Earl Jones plays the voice, and James Earl Jones is getting on in age too. And Hayden Christensen was given this great honor, first of all, in the prequels, to play the character that would become Darth Vader. And then he's given the privilege to come back and kind of fill in this gap that we don't have very much information about regarding what Darth Vader's up to. And it adds a little bit more context. And we talked about, did this show need to happen? And you could have pinpointed certainly Anakin's moment with Obi-Wan on Mustafar as in The New Hope, when he says, I feel a presence I haven't felt since, and then he pauses. Like, you know, we had a moment that made enough sense to target back to that. But we have this incredible moment between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan, and it's what we mentioned earlier about, you know, Darth Vader to a degree kind of absolves Obi-Wan. Just, you know, okay, he blames him for making him this monster, and he didn't. It was not Obi-Wan's fault that he became Darth Vader. That was his choice. And it's a really powerful moment that, like, I think that almost just that exchange, and it's not certainly not the only good thing that's about the show. There's something that I adore about every episode, but I think the Darth Vader material is probably the strongest. Or no. The little Leia material is probably the strongest, and then the Darth Vader material is right up there. But like, it kind of probably made this show required viewing for me. Like, if I'm going to sit down and watch the Skywalker saga, I am also going to watch this after episode 3. You know, and it's not something that, and we've already said it already, it's not something that I thought we necessarily needed going in, but it's proven to me that it belongs in the canon, because Chase disagrees, but we got enough, just enough between Anakin and Obi-Wan to get us there. You know, there's a long ellipsis, almost 20 years pass between those two movies, where we don't really know much about these two guys. And it's just a few little breadcrumbs. It's almost at the halfway point in that gap, and it gives Obi-Wan the turning point that I think kind of it points him in the direction that leads him through mentoring Luke again. Because at the beginning of the show, Obi-Wan says he has to be trained, but, Owen kind of throws it in his face, and I don't think Obi-Wan believed he could do it. Especially knowing that or believing that he failed Anakin, like, what if he failed Luke? And I guess where I'm going is, and I'm talking in circles and not being particularly articulate, but I think it is Darth Vader that gives Obi-Wan the confidence to point Luke on the path of the Jedi. Like, and that is a moment, like, having thought about it, like, I really think it's certainly a turning point for Obi-Wan, but like, it made this whole show really meaningful to me. And that's my answer for, did we need this? Because I wasn't sure going in, and having seen it, I am absolutely glad that we got it, because it fills in a piece of Obi-Wan that we were missing, because at the end of Revenge of the Sith, he's a broken man who's lost basically everything he cared about. And he's given this task that he's not even sure he can fulfill. And then he's given the confidence by his old Padawan that he can still do his job, and that there's still he can still do the job he set out to do, and that there are still things worth protecting in the galaxy because of Leia. And it's like I said, like this show is probably required viewing for me if I when next time I sit down and watch the Skywalker saga, and it is because of the material between Obi-Wan and Leia, and certainly because of the material between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. This is the 5th episode of this show is probably my favorite piece of Star Wars that Disney has produced. And there are highs in the last episode that get very close to that. And I don't think I don't know that it breaks through, but I've said it 3 times already. Like this is Obi-Wan has become required viewing for me in a way that even like The Mandalorian really isn't. I love The Mandalorian and it's its own thing. And my wife and I always sit down and watch the Baby Yoda show. But like I haven't really sat down to watch it again. And like I said earlier, there are 3 episodes of this show that I've watched multiple times, and it's finished less than a week ago. So did we need it? Probably not, but I love it. And this is part of my Star Wars viewing going forward. Go ahead, Adam.
I agree that there are two pieces of the Disney lore that are required reading if I'm rewatching Star Wars. The first one was Rogue One, and it's this because a lot of what happens, and it's not just because of Kenobi, but it is the nuggets, and they're not as strong as they could be, but the nuggets of the crimes that the Empire commits, and a little bit that you see of what the rest of the galaxy is doing, along with Vader's descent and Obi-Wan's kind of self-redemption story that rounds out the story. Because this, from Kenobi, 9 years later, you could go right into watching Rogue One and hit a lot of the similar notes of the resistance to the Empire from the little guys. I'm talking like the network that's hiding Jedi and Force sensitives away and running and getting them away from the Empire. That's the kind of hope and the kind of network that is what becomes Rebels in Rogue One, more so than what I think they kind of tried to do with Solo, when you're like, oh, here's this like gang of outlaws who, oh, by the way, those are actually rebels. They just don't call themselves rebels yet. And it didn't really land in Solo, but I think it spells it out more clearly here.
How do you feel, Chase? Talk to me about Darth Vader.
I thought that scene, their conversation, was extremely strong. The lighting was fantastic. Why is it taking so long for them to figure out that lightsabers give off light and you can do cool things with light on TV? Yeah, well, they did it here. They finally
started using Force Effects lightsabers on set instead of just doing it by a computer. That's literally why. Right.
The sound, the effect of the voice, the voices being blended was amazing. I thought that the acting was excellent. Hayden Christensen, obviously he appeared in other scenes in this show, but even if it were just for this scene, it was worth bringing him back.
I would agree completely.
A great job. The moment when you kind of see him kind of curl a smile from behind.
Yeah, and I didn't notice the smile my first viewing. I picked up on it when I watched it again.
I did. Ooh, it was so good. And, and it also coincides with the light changing to red. And, you really get the sense. You could ask, like, why does he say to Kenobi, "You didn't kill me, you didn't kill Anakin"? Because you could interpret that to be like, Obi-Wan, don't beat yourself up about this. And why would Darth Vader say that? Well, he says it because I think he is trying to hurt Obi-Wan, right? And that sick, twisted smile is taking pleasure in causing Obi-Wan pain and saying, like, Anakin is dead. He is so dead. He is deader than dead. There is no hope. There is no bringing me back. You cannot redeem yourself from this. And I guess he miscalculated in his saying that, but it seemed to me that it was certainly his intention to hurt Obi-Wan, which again is like, yes, Darth Vader is in a very dark place, right? Like he's completely full of hatred for Obi-Wan more than anybody. And it's good to see like when he fights Luke and when he fights Ahsoka in Rebels, first he says, look, we don't have to fight. We can join forces. We can take down the Emperor. He does that for both of them. He does not do that with Obi-Wan. He is like, Obi-Wan, I'm going to kill you. That's all there is to it. Even though Obi-Wan, especially in the third episode of this show, is at a pretty low point himself.
Oh yeah.
And we don't explore this at all, but I would expect that he's probably more susceptible to dark side influence and persuasion than any other time we've ever seen him, which may still not be very susceptible in the grand scheme of things. But like, if ever there were a time when Obi-Wan could be seduced by the dark side, it's probably there. He's hopeless. He's losing. He's totally out of his element, and is a fish out of water.
What if Darth Vader had said, "I forgive you. Come with me now"? Like we may have had a moment where he actually considered it.
Sure. So anyway, I mean, it's like I think that conversation is great. I had some questions about the fight preceding it, like how did Obi-Wan get so strong, which we have already discussed. It's not clear to me what the breakthrough is that allowed that, unless it was simply he just needed to shake some rust off, and this is the story of him shaking some rust off. But it feels like that is not enough, right? It feels like this is meant to be about more than just how Obi-Wan kind of got the hang of it again. It feels like there's some emotional resolution that's happening here. And then after the conversation, I feel like they really kind of lose sight of what they're doing, because Obi-Wan's like, then my friend is truly dead. And well, first Anakin's like, I killed him, just like I'll destroy you. And then Obi-Wan's like, well, I guess you're really dead. And like, that's it. Like you don't have anything else to say about this. You don't have, you could say like, with a simple line, you could justify leaving him alive. Like you could say like, then I will leave your fate to the Force and walk away. Okay, just like that. Now, this very valid complaint that you're not killing him again, even though you just acknowledged that for all intents and purposes, he's already dead. Like you have just said, I guess I'm not standing across from anybody I care about. And then you let him live. Like
okay, I'm going to throw in, and we're running long, so we're going to wrap it up here in a second, but I will throw in that Obi-Wan stayed his hand because Luke and Leia are still out there. And he wouldn't Obi-Wan doesn't want to have to tell Luke that he killed Anakin or Darth Vader or what have you.
Well, except that he would just tell Luke the same thing that he does tell him, which is that Darth Vader killed him, which is what Darth Vader has just told Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Okay, fair.
And then also, there's no more concern that Darth Vader will hunt the children, so if anything, they're safer than ever.
I think the reason Obi-Wan turns and leaves, and sure, a line probably could have been added to it, is that Obi-Wan went to that planet to fight Anakin Skywalker, not to fight Darth Vader. And the whole point, the whole thing that he was grappling with, sitting in the cargo bay beforehand, was, am I going to be able to kill Anakin? Am I going to, I didn't do it then, am I going to be able to kill Anakin now? And then when Darth Vader says, you didn't kill Anakin Skywalker, I killed Anakin Skywalker. And
then
everyone realizes
I have no business left to do here then.
That is done. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that could be true. I don't know that the show we're doing a lot of heavy lifting for the show at that point, which
it leads into your earlier comment that there is some weak writing.
Right. And so, like, as a review of the show, like, I don't have a problem with that being what happens, but the show didn't communicate that. And it's like, it wouldn't have been difficult. It strikes me as maybe a product of the show's production, which I don't know a lot about the ins and outs of how it all went down, but I know it was supposed to be a movie and then it wasn't. And it seems like maybe there were some things that they had in mind, like maybe for the Inquisitors, that they didn't really flesh out as much as they
probably don't know
started.
Much more than you, but I will say that there are quite a few writers credited on every episode, and some are credited on some episodes and not others, and some, occasionally some of them have teleplay credits or story credits or etc. So there's a lot of like what that reeks of are bits and pieces of the various forms of this project that all kind of landed in this version of it. So maybe the writer of the movie version or whatever wrote some dialogue that actually ended up in this, but didn't really write the story of the episode or what have you. Like, so it's that reeks of, 4 different versions of what Obi-Wan would become, all being cut up and then put in order for what we got.
Right. For all we know, the original screenplay could have been the Inquisition showing up on Tatooine, which kind of roots out Obi-Wan, which means Vader shows up, which means Vader traces Obi-Wan to that planet, and boom, there's your movie. Right.
There are some things that kind of seem like an exquisite corpse project sort of function here, where like maybe not all the writers have the same idea of where it's going. Stabbing the Inquisitor, the Grand Inquisitor, and then like he's back, and we don't talk about that. Like, he's just back, and then stabbing Reva, and she's just back, and it's like
she's been stabbed by a lightsaber twice, by the way.
Yeah, in the same
spot. She was stabbed as a kid, but that raises the question: like, if she knows that you can stab somebody in the gut with a lightsaber, and they're probably gonna live, then why is that all she does to the Grand Inquisitor when she tries to kill him?
Right. I mean, it's just like, throw us a bone. Like, you could resolve this easily with a single throwaway line. I don't know what you want it to be, but you could do something. You could say like, I don't know. I'm the kind of alien that doesn't die from that. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. I'm not writing a Star Wars show, but it was. It felt like, did you mean to resolve this? Because you didn't.
Okay. So I'm gonna stop you there. Hold on. I'm just going to say that, okay, there are questions left at the end of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. And I'm going to, we're recording this, it's now 9:15 p.m. on June 25th, 2022. So we don't know at this point if a second season is coming. I presume that it is not. They have said that it's not, but they've also said it's the best, or it had the first couple episodes was the biggest premiere that's ever been on Disney Plus, and that tells me that they're thinking about making more. So, do you?
There were already rumors that they reworked the final episode to leave open end.
I want to ask you guys: do you think we're going to get another season of Obi-Wan Kenobi? And that's my last question.
Yes, because I think that now they have to do something for Luke, at least from a storyline point of view. And maybe fill in some of the gaps. They did a lot of service in Kenobi, filling in gaps that existed. Now they have more gaps to fill in. That's the constant problem with Star Wars. But there's my short answer. But I do have one comment to make, because we've done a disservice before we actually wrap this up. But I'll let Chase answer that question.
Please, go ahead.
Moses Ingram was phenomenal and probably the best antagonist arc in Star Wars thus far.
Other than Darth Vader, but I agree that she was fantastic.
Sure. Yeah,
he's a villainous arc, not an antagonist arc.
Yeah, I think you're right in that she's really like a great illustration of the dark side. Like, she's doing the wrong things for what she perceives to be the right reasons, but she's gotten so deep that she's just keeps doing wrong things. Like she's like, I'm doing all this because Darth Vader killed kids. I don't care how many kids I got to kill to stop him, to get revenge for that time he killed kids. And it's like, oh, well, she decided she did actually care about killing kids, not about torturing kids, but yes, about killing kids.
But all of the previous ones were still a means to an end, which doesn't justify it.
Right.
But once it became personal and it was something that she didn't have to do, she made the choice not to, which is what Obi-Wan alludes to at the end.
But I mean, she follows like, this is how the dark side gets you. It presents you with the means to accomplish your goals. And if you're not patient, which this is how Yoda describes the dark side in the original trilogy. He says the dark side is not more powerful. It's like quicker. It's easier. It's seductive for that reason, but it's not more powerful. And like, yeah, okay, that's good point. That's what happened with Reva. That's what happened with Anakin too.
Right. Well, and I think she, Anakin, and Darth Maul in the animated series are really the only cases in Star Wars that illustrate the dark side being a quicker or tempting method. Because everyone else on the dark side, Vader, once we see like real Vader later on, he's very stoic and intimidating. Palpatine is very methodic. He thinks out everything in a million different ways. Even the Inquisitors, like the Grand Inquisitor and all the other Inquisitors, kept yelling at her for being too impulsive. Like that was kind of the point of the dark side,
right?
But like everybody else who's on the dark side is like, no, be really angry, but do it slowly.
Yeah, right.
All right, Chase. Do you think we're going to get more episodes of Obi-Wan?
I think,
or do you think they're going to continue this in some other Disney Plus show? I guess that's a possibility. Continue Obi-Wan's between movies arc in another Disney Plus show.
There are things they could do with Obi-Wan. They mentioned Quinlan Vos is still running around. We know that Ahsoka's alive. We know that Cal Kestis we don't know that he's alive because we don't know what will happen in other Fallen Order games, but he's alive shortly before this, at the least. There are other characters Obi-Wan could be full of more cameos and have more stuff to do. So they can and probably will make more Kenobi episodes because there is money to be made. I don't really want them to. Sometimes it's okay to have a little bit of mystery around a character.
I love the way this show ended so much that I kind of don't want them to either. Like there are definitely questions they could have answered and that they did not. But I think like this is a wonderful little piece of Star Wars that fits well enough between two really big pieces of Star Wars.
Right.
And I think we could just let it roll without more.
Right. Much in the same way that I don't really want a show about you're not going to believe the lunch that Luke had one time between episodes 4 and 5. It doesn't matter. Just let it go. We don't need all of that to be explored. But I would say if the Vader scene where his mask gets broken was excellent. There was a very similar scene in Rebels.
There was, yes.
They each have their strengths. If you have watched all of Clone Wars and then all of Rebels, the Rebels one hits pretty hard.
That's true.
But that's a big investment to get there. You get there a lot more easily in just the Kenobi show because there's no other required viewing except the movies. If Obi-Wan Kenobi can be a vehicle to kind of let normies in, then cool. That would be great because there's a lot of other content for people to wade through to be able to understand what's going on in the Bad Batch.
A lot easier to watch a 6-episode miniseries than 4 12-episode seasons of Rebels.
Right. So, I think that can be fine. It's got names that people know. It puts less pressure on the show because it can lean on context that's already been established. We already know who Obi-Wan Kenobi is. in some ways that allows a show that allows a show about a character like Obi-Wan Kenobi to be a little bit lazier. Because they'll say like, oh, you already know about Obi-Wan Kenobi. So we're not going to develop his character at all or expand on it or add to it. However, it doesn't have to be that way. And I hope it's not. So I do think they'll make more, and it could be good. Yeah, I mean, it could be a great thing for the show to have more shows with a big name attached to it, like Obi-Wan Kenobi.
And on that note, I think we're going to wrap up this edition of Engine25 Reviews. I absolutely loved the Obi-Wan show. It's not perfect, especially some of the early action scenes. The just derpy foot chases, man. But like, there's so much good material in this show. Like, I think the highest highs of this show eclipse anything else, any of the other live action that Disney has produced, in my opinion. And you know, I'd like to thank everybody for watching. If you stuck around with us for 2 hours, you're just as big a Star Wars fan as we are, and we appreciate it. And I just wanted to let you know that the Force will be with you always. Have a great night, guys.